Hi everyone, and welcome to English Digest. I'm Pat.
And I'm Kat.
And today we're reading through our News Digest article.
Yep.
And it's all about the subject of evolution and also bringing back an animal that's gone extinct.
Yeah, exactly, which is kind of an odd idea. I mean, in many stories there's things about, I think of Jurassic Park.
Of course.
Where you have an island full of dinosaurs that died out millions of years ago. But it's all supposed to be fiction, right?
Yeah, The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is another good one.
Yeah.
Although in that case, they just survived rather than were brought back. I mean, should we bring back extinct animals? Never mind dinosaurs. What about, the dodo or the moa or some of the other ones that have died out? Or ones that will, like tigers and pandas.
Yeah, I think it has to depend on the purpose or how well it would survive. I think there's a lot of things to consider when you are thinking about if you're actually going to do this, and even if it were scientifically possible. But I think that the one that we're talking about today actually has me kind of excited.
Okay.
So why don't we go ahead and read through the article and learn about what's going to happen?
Sure.
A new science startup is seeking to resurrect the extinct woolly mammoth. Colossal, co-founded by entrepreneur Ben Lamb and geneticist George Church, has multiple lofty goals involving conservation, carbon capture technology, and gene editing. However, its most dramatic aim is to create mammoth-elephant hybrids that can be reintroduced in Arctic regions. Church has been working toward the revival of the mammoth for over a decade using CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology. Though it's been extinct for over 4,000 years, the woolly mammoth is said to be a prime candidate for recovery. Lots of well-preserved mammoth remains have been found, giving scientists their full genome sequence and data about their evolution. Also, if reintroduced in sufficient numbers, these mammoth hybrids could have a stabilizing effect on the Arctic environment. Previously, mammoths' migration patterns helped maintain Arctic permafrost layers and certain plant species. Colossal's researchers argue that the return of mammoths could help revive these areas, which would have a great effect on climate change. Not everyone is enthusiastic about this idea, however. Other scientists are skeptical that mammoths would have any significant impact on the Arctic, even warning that they could have a negative effect. The areas that were once their home have adapted in their absence, which may make it harder for new mammoth hybrids to survive. Conservationists also argue that the Mammoth Project's resources would be better used to save current endangered species and address root causes of extinction. Even if Colossal does bring back the mammoth, it won't be soon. Church predicts it will be around 6 years before the first hybrid calves are born, and 15 years before the rewilding process can begin. Considerable technological breakthroughs must be made to achieve this. Despite difficulties and criticism, though, Colossal believes in its project and what it could mean for the world.
Pretty exciting then, a possible return for the woolly mammoth. Great big hairy elephants.
That's right. If you guys have ever seen the movie Ice Age, the main character is a woolly mammoth. Basically, they're bigger than modern elephants, aren't they?
I think they were indeed, yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at a couple of vocabulary words in the title before we go through the article. The first one is extinction. Extinction is the word that's used to talk about when an animal species or a plant species disappears from the earth completely. There are none in zoos, there are none in tiny little labs, there are none left in the wild. It's just gone. We talked about a few of these in our introduction, of course, dinosaurs, dodos, a few things like that. and a lot of other species are threatened with extinction, with disappearing. We can also talk about going extinct, that's using the adjective form, or an extinction event, which is an event like a meteor hitting the earth that wipes out whole species, whole groups.
Yeah, exactly. So extinction is what happens when something dies. But extinction isn't the end. Doesn't that sound kind of like a contradiction? Where if it is, everything dies, well, apparently that is the end. But here they're saying it's not, because a science startup hopes to revive the woolly mammoth. So to revive something is almost sort of the opposite of extinction or the opposite of death. To revive means to bring something back that has either died or it's not doing well, or maybe it could be just as simple as somebody being asleep. So if you revive somebody from sleep or a coma or something like that, then it means you help them to wake back up. If you revive something that's dead, you bring it back to life. So if you were to revive an extinct species, that would mean that you bring new animals in that have not been alive for some time and basically make them live again, give them new life. That's what revive means.
And that's what this group, this startup, is hoping to do. We see in the article a new science startup is seeking to resurrect the extinct woolly mammoth. Resurrect is kind of similar to revive, but it's definitely only applied to when something is dead. It's bringing something dead back to life. Now, we don't mean zombie mammoths, as cool as that would be, but it's the idea of bringing these creatures back from the dead rather than just, there are only a couple left, but we can make more.
Yeah, I think of, the resurrection of Jesus is
well,
what they believe in Christianity.
One.
So, yeah, like he was dead, they brought him back to life. Yeah, for sure. But they are seeking to resurrect the extinct woolly mammoth. This animal has been dead for a long time, and they want to bring it back. Colossal, co-founded by entrepreneur Ben Lamb and geneticist George Church, has multiple lofty goals involving conservation, carbon capture technology, and gene editing. This sentence has a lot of information in it, but let me just start by talking about the company name, Colossal. Colossal means something very, very big and grand, which you could say that a mammoth is. Yeah. And it's co-founded by entrepreneur Ben Lamb, so this is a guy who's like a business self-starter, and geneticist George Church. Now, a geneticist is somebody who is a scientist who works on genes, as in they analyze DNA, they see if they can kind of change it around or do something to manipulate it somehow. So geneticists work on something that can change the genes of a living animal or plant. Yeah.
And this group, at least these two and anyone who works for them, they have lofty goals. Lofty has a similar meaning in some ways to colossal. It's a big goal. It's a very ambitious goal. Lofty means high, but here it can apply to a high ambition. So something you really, really want to do. If you say, I'm going to go home, make my dinner, and go to bed, that's not really a lofty goal for your evening. If you say, I'm going to go home and I'm going to get started on my best-selling novel, that is a lofty goal. You have a big aim, you have a great big ambition, and you're going to try to achieve it.
Or maybe I'm going to write my best-selling novel in one night and then it's going to become a bestseller tomorrow.
Wow.
That's super lofty. So their goals involve conservation, which is trying to save animals and plants from going extinct. Carbon capture technology, meaning taking carbon out of the air and improving the atmosphere. And gene editing, which is, as I just said, what geneticists do. However, its most dramatic aim is to create mammoth-elephant hybrids that can be reintroduced in Arctic regions. So actually, these are not purely woolly mammoths. So they are hybrids. Hybrids would be, and you can get a hint for this by seeing that it's mammoth-elephant. They are a combination of two different things or more than two different things, and usually applied to, you can talk about technology. So you can have a hybrid car, which means that it uses both gasoline and electricity. You could have hybrid animals, like I think of mules, which is a hybrid of a horse and a donkey when they have a baby together. Ligers, tiger-lion hybrids. And mammoth-elephant hybrids would mean that they have the genes of both elephants and mammoths here.
Yeah, and that would help because it would make it easier for them to be born in an elephant mother.
That's right, yeah. So I think they're planning to use Asian elephants to gestate or to be pregnant with these mammoth hybrids.
Okay, and the mammoth hybrids would then be reintroduced in Arctic regions. Arctic is the region around the North Pole, so all the way up at the northernmost part of the world, the Arctic Circle, it's also called. So bits of Canada, bits of Russia, Greenland, all those icy bits right at the top. That is the region where mammoths lived before, and that's why we say reintroduce them. They're bringing them back to this part of the world.
And that's why they have so much hair, because they lived in very cold climates like that. Now, why are they doing this? I think it's a very good question. Just for funsies?
Not quite.
Yeah,
there are other purposes as well, and it's one that this geneticist church has had in mind for a long time. We see in the next paragraph, church has been working toward the revival, that's the noun form of revival of the mammoth for over a decade using CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology. We have mentioned this in news articles in the past with English Digest. Think of this technology as genetic scissors to cut genes out and bring in new genes, like you're editing a sentence by cutting a word and pasting some new ones.
Yeah, exactly. So he's been working on this for a long time. This is not a new idea that he's had. And why mammoths? I mean, there's got to be a pretty good reason why he chose mammoths, and there are actually several good reasons. So starting with, though it's been extinct for over 4,000 years, the woolly mammoth is said to be a prime candidate for recovery. So it's only been extinct for 4,000 years. Usually we think of woolly mammoths as being much, much older than that. But it's not that long ago. I mean, humans already had civilizations by the time it went extinct. Yeah.
So it's a prime
candidate.
Yeah, it means that it's a good thing to bring back for certain reasons, as compared to, say, bringing back the big lizard dinosaurs. And part of this is explained in the next sentence. It says, lots of well-preserved mammoth remains, so dead bodies, fossils, bones, skin, and so on, have been found, giving scientists their full genome sequence and data about their evolution. So we've already talked about genes, this kind of biological code that's in your body that tells the cells what they're going to do and how they're going to develop and so on. Your genome is your entire DNA. It's all the genes that you have in your body. They're not all active at the same time. Some are never active, but you've got the genes in your body and it's every single thing. And to get a full genome is quite difficult because you really need to study every single bit of an animal's DNA to get it. Then we have sequence. We often see these words together, genome sequence. A sequence is, of course, just the things that follow on each other. Like 1, 2, 3, 4 is a sequence of numbers. Your genes are made up of these little pairs of GNA, GCAT, and getting that sequence of all these pairs of DNA is your genome sequence. So not just all the genes that you have, but the order in which they appear in your cells and therefore what structure it has and therefore how you can edit it with these genetic scissors.
Interesting. So it's basically like a code for how to build you. Yeah, interesting. And the reason that they've been able to find so many well-preserved mammoth remains is because precisely of where they used to live. They lived in the Arctic, so a lot of them have been frozen for thousands of years, and freezing tends to preserve things really, really well. They've even found mammoth remains that still had flowing blood, and all their fur and all their organs, all of that. So that's the reason that they're able to get such complete information. And of course, data about their evolution. We briefly talked about evolution at the beginning of this, but evolution is the process by which living things change over time. So if, you have a certain gene that gives you an advantage over other animals like you, and it helps you to survive when it doesn't help them to survive, maybe they die when you don't, then your genes are going to be passed on to the next generation. And this can happen over a short time, it can happen over a long time. The whole thing is evolution. It's how things adapt so that they can survive better.
So that's one reason we can recreate, or we might want to recreate mammoths, because we can. We've got all their DNA. We know what they're built like and how we could do it and how they changed over time to live in the Arctic. There is another reason as well, but we're going to take a short break first before we come back to explain that. Hi everyone, welcome back. We're talking about bringing back, reviving woolly mammoths. Now, we've got a lot of data that we can use to rebuild them, recreate them, but there's a good reason, or potentially a good reason, to do this thing, not just to have mammoths. The article says, also, if reintroduced in sufficient numbers, meaning if there's enough of them, these mammoth hybrids could have a stabilizing effect on the Arctic environment. If you stabilize something, you make it stable. You make it kind of stronger and more able to resist changes. The Arctic won't be as vulnerable to sudden changes in weather or sea levels or things going on in the world. It will be able to resist that and stay pretty much the same as it is. Stay stable. It won't start to just change very quickly in different ways. Now, how do mammoths do that?
Well, it says that previously mammoths' migration patterns helped maintain Arctic permafrost layers and certain plant species. I'll explain migration first, and then I'll explain what they think that this actually helped to do. So migration, or to migrate, which is the verb form, is to move across land or move from one region to another, usually over a season. For example, like birds will often migrate south during the winter to be in warmer places, and then they'll migrate back north during the summer to also have, cooler temperatures so that they don't have to deal with so much heat. And there's lots and lots of animals that migrate. Whales migrate, sharks migrate, even some butterflies migrate. And some humans, I would say, migrate if they have, more than one home in more than one place. Like some neighbors of mine would live in Alaska during the summer, in Hawaii during the winter. So yeah, migration is just moving with the seasons. And so mammoths would migrate by walking around, and they could help maintain Arctic permafrost layers. Now, what is permafrost?
It's basically a short term for permanent frost.
Yep.
Ground that is permanently frozen. It doesn't thaw when the weather gets warm again. It just stays in that frozen condition. So I imagine one way this happens, if the mammoths move around, they're going to eat certain plants, which stops those plants from growing too much.
Yes.
And they're also going to poop everywhere and spread the seeds of whatever they've eaten out so that the plants can find new homes.
That is true. And there was also a theory which I'm not sure how plausible this is, but that the walking motion of the mammoths would help to kind of redistribute the snow so that it would be more evenly packed down across the permafrost layers.
And keep it frozen, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd work. Stop the temperatures rising and glaciers melting and things like that.
Yeah, and since permafrost right now is in danger of no longer being permafrost, and it contains a lot of gases which will do great harm if they are released when it melts, if we can keep it frozen, that's a really good thing. So we hope that, stabilizing the Arctic would be a really big goal.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's a good goal. It's a good idea if it could work.
And Colossal's researchers argue that the return of mammoths could help revive these areas, which would have a great effect on climate change. So, yep, keeping the permafrost permanent would keep the gases out of the air. More plants will help suck out more carbon dioxide and so on in the air. And we look back at that first paragraph. We know carbon capture technology is another thing this group wants to do. So the mammoths do have a part to play in that.
That's true. But is it necessarily going to work? Not everybody thinks so. So the next paragraph says, not everyone is enthusiastic about this idea, however. We see this grammar point here, not everyone. This doesn't mean no one, but it means that there are some people who are not on board. Not everyone or not everybody, saying that there are, out of this group, there are some people who disagree. Yeah.
Another thing to point out is when we use this kind of indefinite pronoun, it's always with a singular verb. So that's why we say not everyone is instead of not everyone are, even though it's more than one person.
Yeah.
So who disagrees? Well, we see other scientists are skeptical that mammoths would have any significant impact on the Arctic, even warning that they could have a negative effect. So if you're skeptical about something, you don't believe it, and you're unlikely to believe it until you're shown proof. Now, it's okay to be skeptical about a lot of things. You shouldn't just accept everything you take at face value. You want to see proof. You want to see evidence. You could go too far. You could be skeptical about everything and not believe anything, even if people tell you it, which is...
I know some people like that.
Yeah, a lot of people are like that. It's not great, but you should definitely be skeptical about certain things. If someone says, hey, I've got this great new house and I want to sell you it and it's going to be really cheap and there are no problems with it, you should be skeptical. What's the catch? What's the thing you're not telling me?
Yeah, exactly.
So, what we're saying is some scientists don't think this would work. They don't believe it would work because maybe they think, you've not thought of everything, you've not considered all the stats, you're only giving us the evidence that shows you're right, but maybe there's other evidence that shows you're wrong.
And they even warn it could have a negative effect. So what reason do they have for thinking this? The areas that were once their home, the mammoth's home, have adapted in their absence, which may make it harder for new mammoth hybrids to survive. That's true. Apparently, many plants that used to be around in the Arctic evolved to coexist with mammoths, and when the mammoths died, those plants became less and less. So there may be less food for them. There may be, less resources to help them survive and thrive.
Yeah, and taking them out of the food chain would have forced other animals to change what they ate. So putting them back in could make things, whether it's the plants they eat, which are suddenly going to mean that other animals like deer don't have food. You throw one thing in, you change one thing in this kind of ecosystem, you have no real idea what the ripples are going to be.
Exactly. And conservationists also argue that the Mammoth Project's resources would be better used to save current endangered species and address root causes of extinction. I think they have a point there, but first we need to explain what conservationists are. We already said that conservation has to do with saving animals and plants from going extinct or keeping populations of them stable. So conservationists are people who specialize in this, people who are working to make sure that environments and ecosystems stay stable and stay healthy. Yeah.
So they're saying, well, why spend all of this money and time and scientific knowledge on bringing back an animal that naturally died out? Humans didn't go and wipe out mammoths,
Did we not?
Not particularly.
I thought we hunted them to extinction.
Maybe, but I think at that age, and the cultures that did it maybe didn't go too far. Maybe it was just heating Earth. Maybe it's an animal that's time has come. I'd have to go back and look. But why introduce this animal that could change a whole thing of ecosystems could change everything when we could be working on saving tigers, elephants, rhinos, all these other endangered animals, and addressing the root causes of extinction. So doing things to protect the environment, to protect animals, to set up areas where they can live in the wild and stop humans from wiping them out in various different ways. Let's work with what we have instead of bringing back something that may not even work and may actually make things worse.
And that's a good point because you know that the animals that are alive now do have a place in their ecosystems. So we could spend those resources on saving them, and maybe that would be a better idea. That arguably could be a better idea.
Right. And I mean, this question may not be answered for a while. People are going to argue about it for some time because we see in the final paragraph that even if Colossal does bring back the mammoth, it won't be soon. Church, that's the geneticist, predicts it will be around 6 years before the first hybrid calves are born and 15 years before the rewilding process can begin. A calf, C-A-L-F, that's the word we use for certain types of animal babies. Elephant babies, cow babies, hippo babies.
Whale babies.
Yeah, whale babies. In the same way we use cubs for lions and bears and kittens for cats and puppies and so on. It's just one of these words that we use for a particular type of animal baby, and the plural is calves with a V-E-S.
Yep. So it will be 6 years before they're born. It'll be 15 years before they can be rewilded. To rewild something means to introduce it back into the wild, and not just in the way of like, here, go into the forest and live. You actually have to prepare them to be able to survive on their own and not be dependent on humans and not be too interested in humans so that they don't, go into towns and cause trouble, things like that. So rewilding is a very important step in trying to reintroduce a species to an area.
Yeah, maybe the first few generations you could never even put out in the wild. You'd have to let them have babies and let them have babies, and maybe their babies could be tried out.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of thing. And whatever happens, we also know considerable technological breakthroughs must be made to achieve this. A breakthrough is some kind of new discovery that kind of gets you past a problem, gets you past a difficulty, and opens up a whole set of new fields and new things you can do. It could be something you discover. It could be some kind of technology you invent. It could be a new way you combine two ideas and go, aha, put these two together, and this is the breakthrough because you have broken through whatever barriers are stopping you from doing a particular thing at the moment.
So, yeah, if we could already do this, then we would have already done it. So that's why we need to break through barriers in order to get it done. So the article ends by saying, despite difficulties and criticism, though, Colossal believes in its project and what it could mean for the world. Of course they do. They wouldn't be doing this if they didn't believe in what they were doing. So that's what we've got.
Yeah, keep an eye on this one. I've seen stories about bringing back the mammoths for a while, so it's obviously an ongoing project, and maybe down the line we may actually get some hybrids. We'll have to see and wait and find out what happens. But that's all the time we have for today. Hope you've enjoyed thinking about these ideas and imagining what it would be like if mammoths once again walked the earth.
I'd honestly be quite excited to see them.
It would be pretty cool, you're right. But we're out of time. Thanks for listening. For English Digest, I'm Pat.
And I'm Kat.
And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.